Hi, welcome to Planet in the Word. I'm Candace, and today we're going to talk about the Dead Sea Scrolls. And the reason we're doing this is because I have a girlfriend that keeps saying to me, I need you to discuss the Dead Sea Scrolls. I don't know what they are or why they're important. So, Bridget, this is for you. So the Dead Sea Scrolls are exactly as the name indicates. They are scrolls that were found in the caves in the region of the Dead Sea. Now, these scrolls were placed there, they think, by the Essenes in 70 AD. Now, we've already discussed 70 AD. That was the year that Rome destroyed the temple in Jerusalem. So the Essenes hid these scrolls, but actually some of these scrolls date to before 70 AD. They're even older. Now, they hid them in the caves because of the arid dryness of the region would help to preserve all the scrolls and basically the library that they placed there. And there these scrolls sat. Now, they sat there from 70 AD, we think, and they were roughly there for about 2,000 years. They were discovered in 1947. Now, 1947 falls again between a few significant things. One, the end of World War II, and two, it predates Israel's statehood. So it falls right in the middle of those things in the transition period. And who found these scrolls? Well, the story goes that there are 3 Bedouin boys that were out because they were shepherds, flocking their sheep in the area, which sounds very Luke 2-ish. But what happened was, the story goes that one of the sheep were lost, and the boy chucked a rock into a cave looking for the lost sheep. Except when the rock went into the back of the cave, it didn't go thunk, it went crash. So of course, being boys, they had to go in and see what that was about. And in the back of the cave, they discovered 10 clay pots, and they're pretty large. Now, 8 of these clay pots were empty. One was filled with what appeared to be sand, but the last one had 3 scrolls wrapped in leather. One of the boys grabbed one of the scrolls, took it home, promptly hung it on the tent peg in his Bedouin tent, where one of the scrolls sustained a little bit of damage. Eventually, the boys decided to see if they could make some money off of these scrolls. So they took them to Jerusalem first to see if they could hit up an antique dealer who'd be willing to buy them. He had wanted nothing to do with those. He thought they very well could be stolen, but he contacted someone that he thought might be interested. So a man named Kondo, who lived in Bethlehem, actually did purchase these scrolls from these boys. But he was unaware of what was it he actually had. So he had to start getting in, reaching out for some scholars to come and evaluate this purchase that he has. What does he have? Is it worth any money? Is it a forgery? Is it authentic? And that's what he did. But of course, the minute he did that, the word gets out that some ancient documents had been discovered. Not a big surprise. People start really wanting that starts percolating everybody's interest. He gets these scrolls authenticated, and they are dated to roughly around the 1st century AD. And now the race is on, right? In the midst of cultural and social and world chaos, we have archaeologists that are now racing into the region trying to see if there's anything else to discover. And really what they're trying to do is they're trying to beat their looters who can sell these things on the black market and make a lot of money. But once they're taken out of context, archaeologically, they lose value because they cannot be authenticated. So over the next 9 years, 11 caves are discovered. And in those 11 caves, they discover over 1,100 documents and over 100,000 fragments. There have been a few additional discoveries recently within the last couple of years, not in exactly the same region, and they are not saying exactly where it is, but there are some additional scrolls that are beginning to come to the surface, and we are beginning to see some fragments appear. But specifically, we're going to talk about the Dead Sea Scrolls. So what is it that they had, and why is it important? Well, it's really important on 2 fronts. The first one is scholastically. Scholastically, every single book of the Hebrew Bible is represented among those documents, except for the book of Esther, interestingly, written in the intertestamental period. And what that allowed scholars to do was, it allowed scholars to evaluate how well had we done. Our Bible was 2,000 years post these documents. How accurate were our translations, even to English, let's say? And what they discovered is unbelievably accurate. Very minute, unimportant changes had been made, such as punctuation or an insignificant word that had been substituted for a word with the same meaning. But they were really surprised at how accurate our translations were, even finding these documents. So it allows them to compare what we've got to what we have been using to what was originally written, which is a great thing. The second thing that it did is beyond just the Bible, there were an unbelievable amount of scrolls that dealt with history and what's a good word for it? They hold additional stories, a lot of apocryphal writings. Some additional scrolls were found that were rules for the community or commentaries on Habakkuk. And interestingly, one of the best preserved scrolls was the Isaiah scroll. So, in addition to just our biblical documentation, we have this plethora of historical documentation. For example, our Bible ends at Psalms 150. However, Cave 11 had a psalm scroll that states that David wrote more than 4,000 psalms, and we don't have those. But they do have some psalms that are attributed to David, found amongst the Dead Sea Scrolls, we don't have in our Bible. Oh, wouldn't you love to get your hands on some of those? And as the Dead Sea Scrolls begin to be translated and put out there in book form, you can begin to read the documentation that has been found. That's a great thing to do. I would like to add two anecdotal things that I think are very important to know because they give you the bigger picture. I mean, isn't it significant that right before Israel gets statehood, after a war that just decimated the Jewish population, one of the most significant archaeological finds of all times comes to surface? So here's two things I would like to say about that are anecdotal stories that make you stop and pause and watch for the hand of God in this. The first one is that John Trevor was actually the man called in to authenticate the Dead Sea Scrolls in the beginning. And he had meant to bring his camera with him, but he forgot it that day. So after he's examining these scrolls, the next best thing he could do was ask permission to copy exactly what he was seeing down so he could take it back to his office and compare with other known documentation. So he randomly copies down a verse. And of all the verses he could copy down, he copies down Isaiah 65:1. And I'm going to read Isaiah 65:1 to you. It says this: I am sought of them that ask not for me, and I am found of them that sought me not. Of all the documentation that he could be the first thing he translates, that's the one he translates. A prophetic statement about Messiah that actually speaks to the church, that the people that are looking for him won't find him, and the people that aren't looking for him, the Gentiles, are going to find Messiah. That's the verse he translates. And the second anecdotal story I want to tell you is recently, within the last few years, the portions of the scrolls went on tour, and they were in LA, and of course I drug my family over there, and we proceeded through the exhibit, everybody at their own pace. So at the end of the exhibit, there was a film room where they were introducing some of the translators and getting their stories and the history behind these Dead Sea Scrolls from a personal level. So I sat down to watch. And as I'm sitting watching, they are talking about the Isaiah scroll. Now, the Isaiah scroll that they found was the best preserved scroll that they have, and it is complete. It is all of Isaiah, and it is beautifully preserved. But they're discussing the day they unrolled it for the very first time. And what they were doing is they were in an office and they had the radio on. And they're recounting how, as they're laying out this scroll and going to open it for the first time in thousands of years, literally on the radio, they are taking the vote of nations to make Israel a state. So as this vote is playing in the background and they're laying this scroll on the table and opening it, what is the very first Isaiah passage that they read? Isaiah 53. Now, if you're not familiar with Isaiah 53, it's very controversial in the Jewish world because it absolutely is a picture of Jesus dying on the cross. You just you can't read it and not get in. That's the only thing you can get. And so the Jews have claimed for years that they think that this passage was inserted post-Christ. And in fact, they think it's been inserted hundreds of years later. That's the argument they make for it being such an exact picture of Calvary. But here we have this scroll that was put in a cave in 70 AD, long before anybody would have thought to mess with it. And the very first passage they unroll is Isaiah 53. I just think there is a beautiful picture of the hand of God intervening in that process. I hope this whets your appetite. This is admittedly way too brief, not full of enough detail. So if this is something you're interested in, I highly encourage you to research and read. There is a lot of documentation out there that does a much better job than what I have done, filling in absolutely the miraculous things that have happened around the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls and the significance of them. But this is just a component that will allow you to understand our videos moving forward when I refer to them, what I'm talking about. I hope this helps. Have a great day. Bye-bye.